Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me fine. I don't know whether you can see me or not. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for taking your valuable time to spend a few minutes on our inaugural directors webinar. At this point, it looks like we have 19 participants. That's a nice start. And of course, the session is being recorded. First, I wanted to thank a couple of people as we're getting started here. Mike Westendorf and Brian Schilling, specialists, thank you so much for the impetus behind getting this started. I appreciate that. Hopefully this will turn out to be a series that will be valuable, an opportunity to have conversations among extension personnel and my office, so I look forward to regularizing this activity. And also I'd like to thank Aaron De La Rosa for teaching me how to use this software, and Aaron is doing the recording of the session currently, and once we know exactly how and where the recorded session is stored, that will go out to everyone. Those of you participating probably won't want to listen to it a second time, but our colleagues who are otherwise engaged today may be interested. So what I'd like to do is start the presentation with just a few slides from a PowerPoint I pulled together to frame out a few of the things that I've been thinking about lately. And so I will load my slides. Is this slide of Sustainable Development Goals being seen? We can see you. Yes, I see some yeses. Very good. So I put this on here. These represents the global goals from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and I had just recently seen this diagram and thought, looking across the various areas, this really represents much of what we do, and so I'm quite pleased that I think everyone who's participating in this webinar right now, as you look across this slide, will find areas where your programs sit very nicely. Our historical raison d'etre and our future falls in these areas, I think, quite nicely. So it's really nice to see the recognition of these areas, and in a sense a validation of the strength of cooperative extension, even here in the 21st century. So I wanted to share this with you, and this is a downloadable slide as well. I want to talk about a related issue to this in a second. I'm not sure how this works. If there's opportunity for dialogue, I would like to give people a chance to comment at any time. I'd like this to remain somewhat informal. That might be difficult. There's only 27 participants though, so I think the opportunity for a conversation should be viable. Anybody care to comment on this slide before I move forward? Okay, well, I see most of the mics are still muted, so I will proceed. There's another piece of sort of economics and blended with philosophy that I think is something that I've been thinking about recently, that also touches very deeply on what we do in extension, and I wanted to share this diagram that will also be the focal point of a conversation on Monday among the department chairs in the school. This is a diagram from Kate Rayworth's recent book, Donut Economics: 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. And I think, again, this is a really nice way of encapsulating the things that we do within cooperative extension, and helps me think about the ways that we can expand our programs and remain relevant, not only to our traditional stakeholders, but as we branch out to other areas that we'll talk about in a few moments. I think this diagram does a nice job. So you see this sort of donut with the safe and just, the green area within the center here, the safe and just space for humanity, is sort of where we would hope that our communities reside. That is, they have access to the essential elements that you see within the center of this donut, the donut hole, if you will: health, food, water, income, resilience, jobs, energy, etc. The idea behind this diagram, you see the arrows or compass points, as Rayworth refers to them. When there is a shortfall of personal needs, they likely fall within this donut hole. And then the overshooting of our exploitation of natural resources is represented by the arrow moving outward, where we look at our impacts on land use, climate change, freshwater use, etc. As I look at this diagram and I think about the scope that encompasses the work that we do within Extension, I find it difficult to identify any areas that don't touch upon what we do. In other words, I think this is a really nice encapsulation of the focus of our work on in communities and with members of communities. So as an overriding sort of philosophical approach to help us keep our bearings, our compass bearings in terms of what we're doing, I think this is a useful model, in my mind, a useful model to think about ways that we can grow our programs and maintain our programs that will have significance for the future. So the book is entitled, as I said, Donut Economics. The author is Kate Rayworth. It was just published this year, 2017. And I do recommend it. I haven't read the entire thing yet. I'm about a third of the way into it, but she really highlights some very important points that touch on how we view the world. And I think her perspective is one that many of us will find resounds within our philosophy, within cooperative extension, to really be meaningful and helpful to communities in a way that makes a difference and stays true to our historical mission of providing for the food, health, economic, and personal well-being of our communities. So I say that as sort of my introductory remarks to put in context, I think, who we are and how we should be thinking about programs that we want to maintain and that we would like to grow. Having said that, I think we have to be realistic about what's our economic climate within the school, within the station and the university currently. So I wanted to share some budgetary information with you so that you understand fully the challenges that Brad Hillman and I are experiencing as we try to maintain our programs, grow some programs, and be fiscally responsible for this experiment station. So this next slide is a oversimplified, that is compressed spreadsheet of the current fiscal state for the station, showing revenue, expenses, and the totals. And what we have in the three columns are, on the first column, where we are as of the day before yesterday. The next column was what we had projected at the beginning of the current fiscal year that now will end June 30, and then how we're projecting out to fiscal year 18-19 starting July 1. So this is overall for the experiment station. That is, it combines the research portfolio and the extension portfolio. Our revenues at about just under $48 million, and our expenses at about $57 million. A number of the other income represents some of the non-capacity funds, the non-statutory funds, things, grants, teaching revenue, and so forth that we've been able to generate within the station. And so you see that where we sit as of this week is a deficit that runs about $7 million. So this is a serious shortfall, and one that we're spending quite a bit of time trying to address. I'm going to break this down a little bit further for cooperative extension on the next slide, and then tell you a little bit of why we're there, and perhaps some of the things that we can do that can help us out. So here it is. Here's these numbers now with the cooperative extension split out from the research portfolio of the experiment station, and you see we're just about a third or so of the total expenses and revenue of the station. So for our purposes, that is within extension, the deficit is at about $2.5 million. So not as great as you saw for the full station, but I want to remind you that while we operate during the fiscal year separately, in a sense, in terms of understanding our budgeting decisions for cooperative extension and for the research portfolio, we are one ag experiment station, a single revenue stream from the state of New Jersey, and so Brad and I are ultimately responsible for the entire experiment station's budget. So we use, for budgeting purposes, we break out research and cooperative extension, but at the end of the day, these things are coupled. So we have some challenges ahead for us, and I think that we're up to the challenge, but there are some infrastructure issues that I'll talk about that pose a problem that we are spending some time to address. Let me point out, by the way, that the other income, that $1.4 million, much of that is from the teaching efforts of cooperative extension faculty. So thank you very much. Tremendously beneficial to the experiment station, to cooperative extension, to have those activities, that teaching revenue. So why are we where we're currently sitting with this problem? There's several reasons. We may be overstaffed with respect to the funding that we're receiving from the state, or one could look at it the other way, and the state is underfunding us, which is what I believe to be the case. Over the last decade, our real loss in expenditures from that statutory support approaches 40%, and that's not something that we've been able to sustain quite very easily or to survive very well. The responsibility-centered management has some great strengths as a budgeting program for us because of its transparency, but it also is a new program, and there are a number of issues that we have to address that are serious problems for us within the experiment station. I think by now that we're a couple years into it, most of you understand that RCM is a budgeting system in which the principle is essentially that the revenue generated by a unit, and NJAS is a cost center, a unit, I'll use the term. The revenue generated by the unit stays within the unit with the exception of a 3% overhead, if you will. These are funds that go directly to the President's office for strategic planning on the part of that office. But otherwise, 97%, we tend to think of it as 100%, come to the unit. And then we pay Rutgers for various services that we receive from the university, and these are referred to as the cost pools. The cost pools include the categories of academic support, debt service, general administrative overhead, information technology, libraries, operations and maintenance, research support, student services, utilities, and then strategic funds. The experiment station pays $0 into the student service pool. That makes sense because we do not matriculate students. And we pay $0 into the academic support cost pool for the very same reasons. But we do pay into the other eight cost pools, are a proportionate share that was determined by the committees that established the program. The problem inherent in the system right now for us is twofold. One relates to what we pay into for our facilities, the overhead and maintenance, and some of the general and administrative funds and utility funds that are based on our square footage. First of all, we have a very large footprint in the university because of the nature of the experiment station, and so that high square footage results in a high fee being applied to us. That in itself, while it's a problem, is not the major thrust of the problem. The major thrust of the problem is that all space is calculated the same. So whether we're looking at the square footage of a run-in shed for a horse or a laboratory in Foran Hall, we're paying the same into the cost pool. Clearly that has to be fixed, and we are working very hard, and Lisa Essler's office is vigilantly working with the Treasurer's office to try to get some resolution to that issue. The other problem that we're facing, we're not alone in facing this problem, but we have to address, and that has to do with the research support cost pool. The research support cost pool should be covered by the indirect costs that we recover on our grants, and on the surface of it, when you evaluate the percentage that we pay into that research cost pool at about 4%, one would say, well, that's not too bad because many of our grants come with greater than 4% indirect costs, so we're able to cover that. The problem is the calculus of the expenses on grants are used in 6 separate cost pools at 4% for each of those cost pools. 6 times 4 is 24, plus the 3% strategic fund means that we are paying into Central 27% of the research expense monies. Virtually none of the grants that we receive within Cooperative Extension, there are a few exceptions, some federal grants that we receive with full indirect, but for the most part, our grants do not have an indirect cost that exceeds the 27%. So we're having to pay out of funds other than beyond the ICR dollars that we receive to cover that research support. This is a major problem. Our mission is to deliver many of the programs that we receive these monies for, and that mission necessitates that we seek funds from agencies often unwilling to pay the full indirect costs. And even the state of New Jersey's contracts and grants to us do not cover the full cost. So I'm working very hard with a committee to address this with Michael Gower's office. This is a problem not only for us in the experiment station, but it's a problem as well for the School of Social Work and Blaustein and a couple other units, including the medical school, where much of the monies from grants and contracts are not providing sufficient indirect costs to cover our expenses associated with these cost pools. Now, how we'll address that, hopefully we'll be able to resolve within the next year or so, but we can't turn our back on our mission of doing the kind of work that we do. So we will get through this. Now, one of the ways that we are able to address some of these the financial difficulties is through RCM's subvention program. Subvention refers to the monies provided to the units from the Chancellor's office that recognizes that we can't operate the experiment station, nor do any of the units at the university operate as a for-profit entity. And so the dollars that come out of those strategic funds, that 3% that I referred to earlier, are used in part then given back to the units based on conversations and negotiations really that take place with our executive dean and the financial officers of the university, in which we present the financial picture of what's happening within the station. We present our strategic plan for how we are managing our organization, and then the Chancellor provides provides those subvention dollars. For example, in the current year, the subvention to the experiment station, I have that number written, is about $8.5 million. These figures that I show you of the deficit are after the calculation of that $8.5 million. So even with the subvention, we still have a shortfall. So I do want to talk to you very candidly about some of the measures that the treasurers use in coming up with a recommendation to the chancellor for this subvention. What they look at, among many other factors, is what are the resources available to the unit in determining how deeply the subvention has to take place. So when they look at the resources of the experiment station, the numbers that they see include virtually all of our accounts. Now, those of you out in the counties, some are wealthier than others, have sundry accounts that you use for your extension programming, and there's no problem with doing that. It's an essential part of what we do and how we're able to deliver programs. But what we do not have is a clear budgetary explanation of how these monies are being used. So when the Treasurer's Office looks at the capacity of the experiment station to fund itself, it includes those dollars. What we need to do, and what you'll be hearing more from us about, is each of you with a sundry account will be expected to develop a budget that shows certainly where the monies came from in that sundry account and how you plan to use those monies for your program. That will enable us to explain to Michael Gower and his staff why these dollars do not support the general operation of the experiment station, but rather fund very specific programs, or monies generated by the agents, for the most part agents, but also specialists to run their programs. But without clear budgets that can account for the use of these funds, we're going to be we have a harder time explaining why we have this money and why we're not filling our budget deficit with those monies. It is not, let me repeat, it is not my intent to touch those dollars that you have in your accounts for programs. But we must be accountable, we must have budgets. So what we will be providing to you from Lisa Essler's office will be a simplified budget template that should be easy for each of you to use, that explains, in fact, what your intent is with those monies, so that we can have those monies withdrawn from consideration as the chancellor makes the subvention decision. We're talking about several $1 million or more of monies distributed across the various sundry accounts. So it's not a trivial amount of money that's out there, and therefore that's impacting that subvention. So it's a very serious concern, and a step that we can take in the right direction for expanding the subvention that we must get from Central to help us get through this. I think on the teaching, I think there's opportunities for us to generate a lot more money on the teaching side, and I'll have more to talk about that in a future conversation that we'll have in a future webinar. So I think from there, what I want to do is sort of step away from the sobering message about where we stand and talk about some really positive things that are happening at the university that have an impact on the things that we're able to do and that I think we will do in the future. So I want to draw your attention to the report of the Academic Unit Organization Committee. I have been talking to you as a group about the work of this committee for some time now. I was a member of the committee over the past 2.5 years or so. The report now has come out from the president in a public way. Hopefully you have all had a chance to at least look at part of it, if not all of it. And you will see that among the 5 or 6 very specific recommendations for the university to move forward is a focus on the outreach and engagement activities of the university. And I'm very, very pleased to see that this attention to what we do within extension reached beyond the walls of our school and station to other units of the university with a fairly enthusiastic and unanimous adoption by the committee that recognizing the power of our land grant mission and the responsibility of the public university in New Jersey to its community is central to our core. So you will read in this report, I hope, some very specific recommendations that were made to begin the conversations among leaders at the university who are engaged with community and who hopefully will look for ways to strengthen our relationships across the school and unit lines, to strengthen our programs and community, to expand the opportunities to reach into our neighborhoods. And the report recognizes the tremendous value of the existing cooperative extension service. The report highlights our presence across the state of New Jersey. And as I had spoken with members of that committee and with the president and others, there was a real opportunity that we don't want to lose here. For 125 years, we've built this infrastructure across this state that provides a place for trusted sources of information to be delivered to communities. And the great successes that we've had in our traditional programs can be replicated across a number of different entities, programs, missions of different units of Rutgers. So I think easily we can accommodate some sharing of space and delivering programs from our extension offices in the counties to make Rutgers' presence felt in those counties across the state of New Jersey even greater than it currently is. So I think there's some real exciting opportunities here. The president has committed to me that he is not looking to use the experiment station's resources to expand extension or outreach programs to other units, that he's committed to investing new resources into growing programs out in the communities, Rutgers programs out in the communities. So I think I see this clearly, and hopefully soon all of you will see opportunities to partner with our colleagues in other units to deliver, to help, to facilitate the delivery of great programs in a number of areas with our stakeholders and new stakeholders in our communities. So for the first time that I can remember, this centrality of the mission of cooperative extension will be adopted by other units with enthusiasm by some, as I heard from colleagues in Newark, and they already have strong programs in Newark as well as in Camden, but also from our colleagues here in New Brunswick, many of whom have some programs but haven't really focused their energies particularly in this area. And using the existing reward system that we have within Extension across other units as well could strengthen the academic and scholarly output directed in communities. So stay tuned, stay engaged, and I think we're going to have some real opportunities to make a difference. Not only is this good for the residents of New Jersey, because I think experience tells us clearly that using good empirical data to solve real world problems makes sense and is productive. But in so doing, I think we have the opportunity to gain new friends, and one hopes to gain additional supporters, and for government to see the value of what has been built here over time, and to see a return to a greater and perhaps more stable funding source for us in Extension. So time will tell. I'm an eternal optimist, and so I truly believe that this is the direction for us to move Extension, broadly move Extension into diverse areas in the state. The university itself has done some recent work to try to highlight some of our impacts on the state. And I had recently sent an email out to all of you in the counties asking you to make the report available in the county office entitled Contribution of Rutgers University to the New Jersey Economy. And I've just swiped some of the bulleted points from that report off of the website that was generated up that I think is a very powerful message we can be using with our stakeholders as they wonder sometimes what they're investing in with the university. I'm often disturbed when people talk about Rutgers or the experiment station as a cost to the state. It's not a cost to the state. It's an incredibly successful investment that the state makes. And so this very first bullet point, for example, that suggests that for each dollar the state invests in Rutgers, the university returns almost $7 to the New Jersey economy. I think if we use that starting point and do a more thorough investigation of what we do, particularly across the agricultural sectors, youth development sectors, and nutrition and preventative health sectors, we could probably justify a figure much greater than $7. There have been some national reports on the impact of extension investments that show figures that are in this ballpark as well. And I think that's who doesn't want $7, sevenfold return on their investment? I wouldn't mind that myself. So you can go through this report on your own. I do want to remind the CDHs or others out in the counties to please print out a couple copies of this report, have it present in your office so that as visitors come in, they see that, prominently see this displayed, and take a copy, review a copy. I have committed to the president that I would get this out to the counties, and he was asking for my feedback on how that's being received. So I am open to your feedback in that particular way. Just put up the last slide of the multiple bullet points that come from that report. So I've been going on for some time now, half hour thereabouts, and seek your input, your commentary. We have, as of currently, I see there are 36 participants. Thank you all for participating. I think it should be easy in this system for you to raise some questions or make some comments. So I will be quiet for 30 seconds or so and let you think about this. And by all means, if there's something you'd like to share, unmute your mic and let us hear from you.
Larry, this is Deb. If we've already reported through our discipline departments what is going on with our sundry accounts, should we just send you a copy of it, or do you want us to redo it in this new budget template, or what?
So that's a good question, Deb. Let me get back to you on that, because I want to do this in a way that is the most efficient for Lisa Essler and her staff to compile. So I will investigate and then send a note out to all on how we want to handle that, because I don't want to make extra work for anyone here. So so stay tuned. Thanks, Deb. Not hearing from anyone?
Hey, Larry.
Yes.
Hello. Hi, it's Bill Lubick and Michelle Bacchus.
Hey, guys.
We just were able to connect. So are you going to make this available online or another fashion? So
yes. At the beginning, I mentioned it's currently being recorded. And as soon as we know exactly what format and where, a message will go out to all with the link to I just don't know whether it will be a file to download or whether we'll have it on a site for streaming. So Aaron is going to work that out with Mike Green, and we will get back to you. I see there was a question that came in.
Are you going to?
Yep.
Are you going to send us this outline that you have here pretty soon, so that we'll have it? Because it took us a half hour to connect. We were having problems with the connection.
Oh, that's a problem. So I think it's downloadable, but in any case, I will send it out. And you know, this is our first run through, so we'll work out the glitches. Hopefully, the next time it won't take you so long to connect. And speaking of next time, we'll probably send out some questions to try to find what we think might be the ideal. There is no perfect time to do this with a program as large as we have. There is no time when everybody's available, but we'll try. We'll record all of these, and we'll try to find a time. I think lunchtime. You know, sorry to disturb your appetite, but I think lunchtime is probably a good time to do this. I have a message from Brian regarding the cost pool structure, and he asks if there's an understanding in central administration about the implications for our ability to conduct state-funded research. That is, it's not financially sustainable to pay 27% to cost pools when the state generally caps F&A at 10%, which is often applied, issue-driven, and responsive to need. Would it be useful to provide examples of state grant or contract funded projects that have been completed in recent years? Yes, Brian. So that's the core of the conversation that I and the Dean of Social Work and representatives from Blaustein and other schools in this committee that's a fancy name for it. Basically, it's the State Contract Committee. The State Contract RCM Committee. So Michael Gower's office does understand the problem, appreciates that we're having difficulty being able to be sustainable in this way. We haven't solved it yet, but I think we have each of us that are facing these problems, who have many of these state grants, have given very specific examples on the deep cost to us. And we're highlighted, we in Experiment Station SCBS are highlighted as being particularly vulnerable because we have some rather large grants. I mean, take the SNAP-Ed program, for example, that amount to a tremendous burden on our ability to pay into the various cost pools. Thanks for that question, Brian. So Michelle asking about offsetting when grant pays for our salaries. Well, it certainly helps when you're able to put part of your salary on a grant, of course, but that's not getting directly at the issue of the indirect costs associated with research. Everyone recognizes that, well, not everyone, within university administrations, it's well recognized that research actually loses money. People think often that, oh, you have these big grants, therefore it comes with all this indirect cost monies, but rarely do the indirect cost dollars cover the actual expenses of research, the infrastructure, the facilities, the equipment, the maintenance contracts for the equipment in your labs, the staff necessary to, and the fringe benefits on those staff to do that research. So universities invest in research. The question then becomes, you know, to what extent is in my mind, the question is to what extent is the university disengaging from that support of research by charging us so deeply in the various cost pools other than the research cost pool. So part of this is an economic model discussion about how to generate sufficient monies coming back to Central to run the university. You can't deny the need for the university to keep lights on and have libraries, maintain student programs, etc. This university operates on about $730 million in funds generated through these cost pools. I would like to see what steps the university is taking to reduce their costs, thereby reducing the burden on us in these cost pools. But nevertheless, I think the Experiment Station has a very different mission than the academic units of the university. We exist to deliver programs to communities, to the public, and that needs to be recognized across town. Personally, I think the experiment station should be pulled out of should not be considered a cost center at all. I don't think I'll win that argument, but it's my starting position in the debate of how we move forward. By the way, I think you can download this PowerPoint. I just was looking at the presentation content page, and I see that it says other, and at least the default setting that I have selected is that this says other presenters can download. So I'm not sure if all the viewers can download. We'll get at ways of simplifying the downloading of any content that I show in future webinars. By the way, I hope that we use this webinar series also as a way for others to communicate broadly, and so I would hope, and I think we're planning, that specialists will use this opportunity to talk about some of their programs to agents and vice versa. So other questions? Jenny? I don't see Jen. Oh, here we go.
Larry, this is Pat Hastings.
Yes.
What occurs to me is that I am not aware of the other units that I could be partnering with. Some have recently come on my radar screen that I did not know were part of the university. So, for example, the Poison Control Center in New Jersey. So is there, within the report, or is there another way that I could start identifying other units that I could start to partner with?
So I don't have an organized system as of yet to do that broadly, but currently I'm certainly able and willing to work with individuals who are looking for these other partners. As you mentioned, the New Jersey Poison Information Education Center is one that makes a whole lot of sense for you, Pat, and I think there may be others within the medical school, particularly in infectious diseases or other areas where there could be some nice opportunities for collaborations. So this is something that will be the central focus, I think, of this outreach council as it gets established, to begin to create the database of areas where community engaged scholarship can freely interact. So great question. There's not a really efficient system in place yet, but we will move in that direction.
Okay, great. Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome. And then I see a texted question from Jenny. How does cost share get accounted for in RCM? And should we avoid pursuing funding sources that require cost share and or restricted to F&A lower than 27%? So on the first part of the question, I don't think the cost share is accounted for in RCM. That's an excellent question, and I will follow up on that, because I'm not certain. I don't know how it would be used currently, but that because the calculus is based on the expenses on the grants, and so I don't know that the cost share piece is calculated into the expenses. So that's a really good question, Jenny, and I'll pursue that one. And then the question is, should we avoid pursuing funding sources that either require cost share or are restricted to F&A lower than 27%? No. We have a mission, and I think our mission is more important than RCM, and is more important than our deficit. And so we'll resolve this inherent problem with RCM without blowing up our mission. But thanks That's an important point. We can't, if we stop serving the people we're meant to serve, then we might as well just pack it in. And I'm not prepared for us to just pack it in, nor does anybody want us to just pack it in. So again, we're only 2 years into RCM, and everyone, and when I say everyone, I'm talking about everyone in the Treasurer's office and Michael Gower's office, recognizes that this is a living, breathing entity that requires fine-tuning along the way. So we have not been shut out in the conversations at all about how to make this workable for us in the experiment station. We have a new chancellor coming, by the way. I didn't mention Deba Dutta, who will be joining us July 1. He's going to be visiting with Bob next Thursday. I hear nothing but really great stories about his commitment, to the land grant mission. His academic history is in land grant universities, so whether it was Purdue or Illinois, he understands what we are, who we are, what we do, what our mission is, and we will be helping him understand even more the specific issues that we face here in New Jersey, the most densely populated state, most highly urbanized state in the country, and I'm feeling pretty optimistic about the kind of support that we will get from him, not only in terms of the subvention, but also in terms of the fundamental support and belief that what we do continues to be relevant. Not seeing other questions coming in, nor hearing from anybody. I do want to be respectful of all of your time.
Larry, this is Mike Westendorf. Can you hear
Hey,
me?
Mike. Yes,
Yeah, I'm calling from my cell in the car, so the system works great. I just didn't have access to slides.
understood.
I just had one comment about webinars. The specialists are getting together on a regular basis, and this is one of the things we're talking about is coming up with a series of specialist presentations that can go out to all of RCE about their programs, so we can kind of reunite some of those connections between specialists and agents. And then, of course, at some point, we'd want to pull agents into that communication as well. And of course, we'll work all that through the director's office.
Great. Thank you. That's the intent. I really like the idea that we can have ongoing, regular conversation that overcomes the challenges of being distributed across 21 different counties. Thanks, Mike. I think I can adjourn our first presentation. Thank you all. Stay tuned for the emails that will announce how to review the recording, how to download the presentation I gave, and then I will be following up on the specific questions that I wasn't able to provide sufficient data from both from Deb on our budgeting for our sundry accounts and from Jenny with respect to cost share issues. Have a lovely weekend. And I meant to say this when we started, and so I'll say it in my closing remarks. Thank you so much for what you do. I pay attention and am deeply appreciative of your commitment to your extension activities. So thanks from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much. Okay. Bye-bye all.